are never, ever, ever gonna do regime change. Are never, ever, ever gonna do regime change. Oh, wait. Shit. Oh, God. What? Oh, no. Did we, was it, Venezuela? Oh, God, we said we weren't gonna, you know what? Let's just get into it.
Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right, are we ready, guys?
Happy hour.
Happy hour.
We fucked that up so bad.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Michael Kristoff.
I'm Anna Muskie Goldwyn.
And I'm Anthony Barkett.
And
that was
those
a good one,
golden
Michael.
pipes you just heard were me and
and T-Swift?
Comrade T-Swift.
Comrade.
just mulling over a little minor change in progress down
So
in the
here's my
southern
question.
hemisphere.
Did you hear the song somewhere and then think that in your head? Or were you thinking of the joke and then you were trying to think of a song that would fit the joke?
It was the second part. I was literally,
Oh.
I thought of this 30 minutes ago before record. I was like,
Wow.
something about we're never going to do regime change. And then all of a sudden,
You were
my
like, "It's
girlfriend,
that
who's a big Taylor Swift fan, I think has like incepted me. And so I'm subsequently listening to a lot of Taylor Swift. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, isn't there a song that Taylor Swift sings about regime
About
change?
never
And
doing something.
yeah, it turned out it was about a boyfriend.
Taylor Swift famously talking about regime change in her songs.
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing.
Exactly.
Boyfriend, country, same thing.
You know, you're not far off there.
Well, Happy New
well-
Year, everybody.
Great to be here. Great
Do
to
we
be with
have
you
any
guys.
2026 resolutions on the table?
I'm doing damp January.
I don't know.
Cheers.
I don't understand what that means. You literally are sipping a massive glass of whiskey.
Exactly. It means drinking less, but not
Okay.
fully ruling it out, because I feel like we live a lifestyle and such as we have a happy hour show that makes it difficult to do dry January. But I think we can do a scaled back.
So
I-
is this
I wanna
just like
point
when you're
out,
at when you're
Anna-
like
Anna, you did dry January last year, I'm pretty sure, during our podcast.
I have
pretty
never done dry
disappointing.
January because like I just don't really drink that much.
Right.
Yeah.
But also our ratings dropped last January.
Did
so-
they? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
They
fun
went
when I'm
dry,
drunk,
as
so
it
maybe
were.
that's. Should I drink
Yeah.
more? Should that be my New Year's
Yes.
resolution?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're doing a soaking wet
I'm
January.
gonna do a wet ass January.
Yeah, wet
Yeah,
ass
let's
January.
flip. Let's flip. Michael and I
That's
will
great.
do organic wine. You
Yeah.
switch to scotch
Perfect.
and
That would
Manhattans.
be
Yeah.
great.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I can't. Oh, any alcohol that
Well-
makes me go like.
Oh, then we're gonna have a great show.
I do have something funny about alcohol. Someone just texted me and they were like, after they were over at my house, and they were like, did you make my Aperol spritz with vodka by any chance? And I was like, yeah, of course, that's how I
What?
make my Aperol spritzes.
You make
And they're
Aperol
like-
spritz with vodka
Yeah, instead of champagne. It's way
Wait.
better.
instead of champagne. That means there's no bubbles.
Yeah, I do soda.
Oh, soda
water.
water.
Wait,
Oh my god! But
Wait, is
then you
this
don't tell
real?
people that you're putting hard alcohol in their drink that they think is gonna have champagne in it.
Well,
wait.
I've done this even in Italy, and the Italians think it's a genius idea.
Okay,
you go
but
do you
vodka
tell people-
instead of what?
Vodka, soda, Aperol, and sometimes a splash of cranberry.
But do
And an
you?
orange
So you're
slice.
making a
But
vodka
surely-
soda with a splash of cranberry, like
with a splash of
Yeah.
Aperol.
an Aperol.
It's
An
vodka
Aperol.
soda with a
Yeah.
splash of Aperol.
Yeah.
Wait, but I
Wow.
am kind of on the side of your friend where it's like, I do think you have to do a disclaimer to people of like, I'm serving you hard alcohol, which is like what, 20% alcohol, whereas champagne is like 8.
Okay, for starters,
45% alcohol. Vodka is
Okay.
about 80% alcohol.
for-
Bourbon's
Wait,
90
really?
plus.
The
Yeah.
champagne is 40% alcohol.
No. Vodka is 40%. It's
Oh.
80% alcohol.
it's not my
It's
fault.
80
okay?
proof, 40% alcohol.
I don't know
Who
what the numbers
cares?
are, but you understand
Yeah.
my
Who cares?
point.
Champagne is like
no, I
10%
don't because
alcohol.
she
It's
wa- she was
because then
talking.
you're gonna.
She was talking to me while I was making the drinks, so I
Oh,
thought
okay.
she
Well,
obviously
then that's
noticed.
okay.
I'm just imagining this person being like, yeah, my New Year's resolution is like, I have cut out vodka
Hard
and
alcohol.
alcohol because I just go crazy when I have vodka. And Anthony's like, oh, really? Glug, 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 glug. I make
Such-
Aperols a different way.
Such tricksters. Oh my God.
Speaking of tricksters, I think the same could be said for the Trump administration, who promised they wouldn't intervene at any cost in a southern foreign country like Venezuela. And yet here we find ourselves
Called out by Taylor Swift.
Really interesting, kind of crazy news kickoff of the year. Anna, what the hell's going on in Venezuela?
I feel so when I was trying to kind of just like organize the thoughts and like notes around this, my brain kept taking me in like different there's so many stories within this story. So I'm not going to go through all of them and we can talk about it, but the big news now is obviously the capture of Nicolas Maduro, the former, now I guess, president of Venezuela, and his wife Cilia Flores last Friday night. Maduro and Flores have now in U.S. court entered pleas of not guilty to narco-terrorism charges, which are mainly concerning the trafficking of cocaine through Venezuela into the United States. His capture was, if people saw photos, met with jubilance by many Venezuelan Americans, since he was, as we all know, a dictator who forced many of them to flee the country because of political beliefs, political persecution, and namely just a gross mishandling of the Venezuelan economy that left many people in poverty. So that's one side of it. Then, of course, the capturing of the leader of a sovereign nation has some pretty important and dangerous worldwide implications. Most notably, I think what has been talked about is, what does this mean for Russia's stance on its invasion of Ukraine? Can Putin now just go like snatch up Zelensky if he wanted?
Right.
Or perhaps
How about
even
China?
Right. Well, I was going to say perhaps even more consequential to the future of global stability, China's stance on potentially invading Taiwan, because China has said, as we have said, Nicolas Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker. China has said Taiwan does not have the right to exist under their belief. So if that belief holds true, can they just go and invade? So Republican lawmakers are standing behind Trump's decision, while Democrats are, for the most part, really like sounding the alarm of these foreign policy decisions and implications. There's a lot to talk about, like I said, but before we talk about the many different facets of this, I did want to share a couple points from Congressman Maxwell Frost from Florida, because he made a video that I thought was just interesting and to the point, and kind of weighing the balance of all of these different things that are happening right now. He has a lot of Venezuelan constituents, and I think he laid out those people's feelings in the same balance of the problematic implications of what the Trump administration did. So he made the following points in his video. 1, Maduro is a brutal dictator. 2, Trump has decided to use Venezuela as a political pawn, which we can talk about more what that might mean. 3, Trump doesn't care about the people of Venezuela. He pointed out that last year, the Trump administration actually ripped away temporary protected status for many Venezuelans last year. And 4,
right, like hundreds of 100,000.
Yes,
plus
and 4
Venezuelans. Yeah.
4, and I think this is where I found this video to be particularly important from him. He said, people are celebrating, and that is valid. So, where does your mind go, Anthony, when you think about what's going on right now?
I don't think any of those options that you mentioned is where my mind went. My mind went, who's profiting off of this?
Totally.
And I don't know if you guys saw, but there is a pretty well-known billionaire who runs Elliott Management. His name is Paul Singer. He's worth about $7 billion. He's going to profit hugely off of this. So
is he an oil
can
person?
I give you? Well, let me give you a little background. So in 2024, he donated $5 million to Trump's super PAC, and he donated an additional $37 million to support other Republicans to Congress. He also donated an undisclosed amount to fund Trump's second transition. When Thomas Massie started speaking up against Trump on the Epstein files, who did Trump go to put up $1 million to help fund someone to go against Massie? This guy.
Paul Singer. Wow.
He was one of his biggest supporters in Trump's first term. So in November 2025, Singer acquired Citgo, which is a U.S.-based subsidiary of the Venezuelan state-owned company called PDVSA.
Wow.
He ended up buying Citgo for about right under $6 billion because the sale was forced by creditors of Venezuela after the country defaulted on its bond payments. They have 3 major refineries on the Gulf Coast, 43 oil terminals, and over 4,000 gas stations. Now, advisors to the court who oversaw the sale valued Citgo at $13 billion. Venezuela values it at $18 billion. Now, the biggest issue is Citgo was purposely built to process the heavy oil that's made in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
Like the oil in the U.S. is much cleaner. It's not as, dense.
The one in
So
Venezuela, it's
it's-
harder to extract.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
it's kind of made Citgo's operations far less profitable. So now, Maduro was seeking an appeal to the court approval of his bid to buy Citgo.
Wow.
And now, since Maduro's ousted, that appeal is probably going to
This will
be
go through.
thrown. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Will be thrown out.
will be thrown out. And basically, all of this oil that we're going to be getting is going to be going through Citgo
Wow.
refinery
Wow.
now.
Well, I
So
think
that's
it's
what
Yeah.
Follow the
I mean,
money.
I think I would echo that, Anthony, and I think that the parallels of this with respect to Desert Storm and the Iraq War and the oil elements that are at play, I think, are just alarmingly similar. And the fact of the matter is that Venezuela has one of the largest, I think by far the largest oil reserve in the world. And the problem is that Maduro has run the economy and the infrastructure into the ground. And so they actually can't afford to be refining all of the oil that they have. And so they are bad actors. They are suppliers to Cuba and to other bad nation state
Well, more than
actors.
Cuba, would be Russia, China.
Right, Russia, yeah.
Cuba's the
and
least
vice
of,
versa. Russia has provided them with a lot of weaponry, and they are allies. And so I think that where my head to your question, Anna, like, what does this mean? Where does my head go? My head goes first and foremost, this screams of a Marco Rubio play to start going after Cuba. He wants regime change in Cuba. This is step one to achieve that. He has made no qualms about vocalizing that. And if you start to cut off Cuba from Venezuela, that is a real major lifeline to Cuba. So that instantly, this now affects Cuba, which Rubio is for. I think, Anthony, that is a fascinating element of the inside baseball of the oil and natural gas industry.
Well, also,
And I think,
sorry, I was gonna say, just on that, what Anthony was saying, there was also just reportedly when, like, on Sunday or something, a sudden meeting of like all these huge Wall Street companies to talk about the reinvestment strategy in Venezuela. And so it's like,
right.
lest you think that this is anything but an attempt to get American interests into the country, they're not even trying to hide that.
Right.
Yeah,
and the last thing I would add here is that, I am not fully against, I'm not entirely against regime change when under certain circumstances, but going into Venezuela here under the guise that Maduro is this major drug kingpin, there just isn't the evidence to support that, right? We've seen these boat strikes, which are very alarming and unfounded. There's been no confirmation of this sort of thing. The facts and the data show that the majority of Venezuelan drugs actually go to Europe, not the United States. And I think you cannot be a president who goes into a country under the guise of we're rooting out the drug dealers, when here at home you pardon a lawfully convicted former Honduran president serving a 45-year sentence for drug trafficking. And so these two, you can't square this circle. And I think that it is so outrageously disingenuous of the Trump administration to go in there saying they have the interest of the Venezuelan people at heart, the interest of the American people at heart when it comes to stopping the drug trade, because the data and the facts just simply do not support that.
Well, the other thing is that, as I mentioned, the majority of drugs that are alleged to be coming through Venezuela to the United States are cocaine. And not that we should be having cocaine run rampant through the streets of America, but cocaine is not what is killing most Americans from drug overdoses. It's fentanyl.
It is, in fact, what brought some of our favorite 1980s movies. Anyway, I'm sorry, Anna, go on.
We're talking about
Yeah.
pro cocaine. Okay,
Yeah.
but
Who's
but
to
just
say?
to your point, Michael, it's like I think that it's a manipulation of the American people because essentially what everyone has become familiar with is there are too many overdose deaths, right? That's an unarguable, although that has actually been dropping over the past few years. And the majority of those deaths are from fentanyl and from meth. And those two drugs are not coming through Venezuela. They're coming through China, basically through China to Mexico, to the United States in this really sort of fucked up like circulatory process where the ingredients are shipped from China, they're made in Mexico and then trafficked into the United States. And so I think that if you're just someone who glances at the news from time to time, you're saying, okay, yes, overdose deaths. Okay, there's this country that they're saying is trafficking drugs and this president who's in charge of it, that must mean that he's responsible for the overdose deaths. But that's not true. And it's not to say that Maduro isn't responsible for some drug trafficking that is bad, but he's not responsible for the drug trafficking that Americans actually should be concerned about.
Yeah.
I mean, we know this administration is very good at helping themselves and then putting together a story that is supposed to cover up how they're helping themselves.
Yeah.
Even more to the fact of a person who opened up a new account on one of those betting sites and placed that Maduro was going to get kidnapped like the following day and made $400,000.
So
do we think it's Barron?
It's Barron, right?
Probably Secretary Noem's kids. You know, like it's just right. It's probably Pete Hegseth, one of Pete Hegseth's.
By the way,
kids.
it's just Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, it could just be Pete Hegseth. He's like, what won't they notice? 30 grand. Like,
the other thing I just wanted to add in terms of like the administration obviously having their own self-interest in, and what Trump is saying is like, this is so good for Venezuelan people. And I think that's why I brought up the sort of ecstatic nature of a lot of these Venezuelans living in America, because I do think that it's important to acknowledge, however, if we think for a second that this is Trump doing this for the Venezuelan people, I think we're sadly mistaken, because it was also announced today that DHS, so as I said, last year, temporary protected status was removed from, Michael, that might be hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know the number, but from a lot of Venezuelan Americans who basically had come here and seeking asylum from the Maduro regime, were granted that status. And then Trump essentially said, no, you don't have that status anymore under this administration. Now the DHS has put out another notice saying, Venezuela is safe now. You can all go back to the home that you love. And it's so misleading because it's like, first of all, it's not fucking safe. The vice president, Darcy Rodriguez, who was Maduro's VP, is now the president. And even though she is kind of talking in this measured way in regards to Trump and America's presence there, it was just reported in The Economist, which is not a partisan publication by any means, of saying that she's very quickly consolidating power back around this ruling party. And so you can't just like, you don't chop the head off and the whole body goes away. Like they're all still there and they have an immense amount of power. So to bring it back to these TPS recipients, there's no world in which for the vast majority of them, it is safe to return to Venezuela or remotely prosperous, as that doesn't happen overnight if it will ever happen at all.
By the way, let me give you some numbers on those TPS recipients. Between roughly 300 and 350,000 individuals received temporary protective status in 2023, and overall granted in 2021, 600,000 Venezuelans in this country. So that, like, Okay, you've just taken that away, but now you're saying, "Oh, we are welcoming Venezuelans because we've just liberated you." Like, no,
No, but it's not
no.
saying welcoming Venezuelans. It's saying now you can go back to your country. Like it's essentially
Right.
saying like it's safe now, and that's just so ridiculous. And it's such veiled. It's a way to veil the harshness of the immigration policy. And so I think that's why
But I
this
think
whole
weren't they also saying we will welcome Venezuelan refugees now? I'm pretty sure
Well,
that they said
Yeah.
that in the aftermath. Now, obviously,
Jeez.
so
not
they're
going
saying
to, but-
both. I
Yeah.
guess. They're
Yeah.
saying we'll welcome you if you come in under the Trump administration, but if you came in under the Biden administration, bye-bye.
Right, you're a criminal. Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that is what is, I mean, we could talk about this forever and we should move on, but like we haven't even fucking talked about Greenland. That's for
No.
another day. But like
Tonight, next week, let's see
what
what
I
happens
think-
this week.
yeah, what I think is so important about what has happened is that it touches every aspect of American policy, of international policy, of certain areas of our own lives on a daily basis, whether that be immigration, whether it be the cost of oil, which can then be turned, which of our gas. Like there are just so many facets of both political and cultural life that this move touches. And what I think is so frustrating to me and kind of scary is I don't feel like the people who are attempting to do this have any fucking idea of how to do it, except Marco Rubio, who, as you mentioned, has very ulterior motives in all of this because of his own personal story being a Cuban American. So
Right.
I just feel like we are not in the hands of safe people and of serious people. And
No.
I'm sure they do have some sort of a plan, but the only people I think who are smart in this are Marco Rubio, who has ulterior motives, and people like Paul Singer, who Anthony mentioned, who only care about the money.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
let me tell you about a smart person who is
Okay.
a politician on our plate list.
Please.
And that would be former Marine and current Democratic Massachusetts Congressman Jake Auchincloss.
We love him.
Now, we have talked a lot about him, but the reason he is on our playlist today is because I think this is a really good question to pose to you guys and to our listeners as it relates to the fate and the future of the Democratic Party in juxtaposition with the election and recent inauguration of Mayor Zoran Mamdani in New York. So the Washington Post had a big op-ed piece with the headline, "Behold, a Democrat who doesn't preach from the Church of Progressivism." And the thesis of this op-ed, as you could guess it, was that one of the best and brightest young centrist voices in Congress right now is none other than Jake Auchincloss. So, we've talked a lot about him. He's a 37-year-old former Marine, served in Afghanistan. And I want to read you a couple of things that this op-ed pointed out before I get to the fundamental question of this. So, he's been asked about guns, right? And he says, "I slept, ate, trained, and patrolled with an assault weapon for 4 years. I cleaned it before I ate and slept every night. Selling AR-15s at Walmart to teenagers is not just dangerous, it also undermines the military ethic and degrades warrior craftsmanship." So, hell of a response to the question of guns. Let me give you another one on big tech. He's proposing a 50% tax on companies' advertising revenue to the tune of over $2.5 billion to help finance 1,000 new trade schools across the country, because he believes that we are losing trucking, factory workers, plumbers, electricians. And the data shows that there's over 1 million of these jobs across the country currently or open. And then the third thing is he talks about, the pandemic as it relates to schooling. And he won in 2020. And he was like appalled at these Democratic run cities where, public health experts kept schools closed. And he was like, they're just he said, quote, "their condescending attitude to parents who were rightfully frustrated watching their kids atrophy at home. So, the fact of the matter is that when you really break it down, most of this country falls in that middle ground. They call it the sort of politics really happens between the two 40-yard lines, right? And I think that when you poll most Americans, that's typically where they tend to fall. So we just saw all of this hoopla around Zoran Mamdani getting elected. He ran on a very clear democratic socialism platform. Jake represents a very different view. What do you guys think is the future of the Democratic Party with respect to Jake Auchincloss?
I mean, I feel like we have to change our definition of what a centrist is, frankly, because I think that there's a lot of different dynamics happening in terms of belief systems in our country, where you see a lot of people who may have otherwise considered themselves Trump supporters being in support for something like Medicare for All. And those typically are very poor people. They're people who are on Medicare but oppose Obamacare. There's a lot of contradiction in that. But I think when you take the politics out of it, there's that group of people. Then I think the people that Jake is kind of speaking to and potentially trying to win over and represent is a more kind of incrementalist, friendly to capitalism group that I think, look, maybe to your point, that is the majority of Americans, but I also feel like as Americans are getting poorer and poorer and there are more people struggling and struggling, I think that is why the message of someone like Mamdani, obviously New York's a very liberal city, so it's kind of a hard barometer, but I think there are a lot of people around the country who responded to that, and Trump himself responded to him, right? I think that there's an element of the Trump voter that can align with that. And so I feel like for Jake Auchincloss, first of all, I think that thing about big tech is an incredible idea. They are making so much money off of advertising to us because they're stealing our data and we're allowing them to do so, that they should be paying a larger tax on that, 150%. I'm so into that idea. I think the problem is that
isn't
sometimes—
that a great proposal?
Totally. But the problem sometimes, I think, from a lot of these quote unquote centrist Democrats or whatever you want to call them, is the policy ideas are a little bit in the weeds. I think it's what happened to Hillary Clinton. I think it's what happened to Joe Biden. And I think there's something that gets lost in translation when it isn't black or white. And that's why people love Trump. And that's why people love Mamdani, because they're black or white. We're going to give you free rent, or we're going to make America great again, right? It's a really black and white signal. And so I think that for someone like Jake Auchincloss or people who agree with him, whoever wrote this column in the Washington Post, I'm sure is a very intellectual person, right? Most Americans are not highly intellectual. Not to say they're dumb, but they're not reading the Washington Post every day. So it's who can put forward those kinds of ideas that someone like Jake believes, but in a way that can communicate to people who just want to hear the black and white of it. Because frankly, the economy has been driven so far into the ground by both Republicans and Democrats, and frankly, mainly by corporations who over time have profited off of people being poor, that there's just no coming back for some people. People are fucking hurting. And I don't know that someone like Jake Auchincloss can speak to that deep hurt that people feel, no matter how valid and good his policies are.
I think you hit that on the nail on the head there, Anna, because especially with the Mamdani and Trump, is they're both so charismatic as well. Jake doesn't necessarily have that charisma. And I actually think he needs to do something as crazy as they are to be noticed. He's still not super noticed. And I mean, you got to looking at Mamdani, despite whatever he says, I'm he feels like a great politician. He doesn't lose his cool. He kind of laughs things off. He has great singers. And then he says something kind of outlandish and you're like, whoa, is he actually going to do that? And that freaks out the billionaires, and same with Trump, where you're yeah, he actually might cut off funding to all these groups. and then maybe Big Pharma is going to have to do something, but that would be crazy. Like you would have to go through Congress first to do that. But this is where I think Trump's being a bit effective, is he's like pulling those strings that no one has ever done before either. And I think that's Mondani's just doing it on the left.
Yeah.
I
and
feel
on,
like
on a smaller level.
I feel like I see Jake not yet breaking out as like, you know, a president, but as like maybe a vice president or a senator.
Well, I also think
And
as like a thought leader to the things you were saying. Yeah.
And I think that like, but a thought leader though, I feel like a thought leader is more front and center. Also, I feel like a total like academic weenie saying the word thought leader, but
I'm the one who said it, so I'll be the academic weenie.
Nevertheless,
and is the weenie.
Feel like I
the
feel
weenie.
like, you know, I can see somebody like a Jake Auchincloss balancing out a Wes Moore ticket, right? Or even a Gavin Newsom, like some, you know, or others. Like I feel like he is somebody who is like a great, at least now, right, is like a really rock steady number two. And I know what you mean. Like he's a little academic when it comes to like, you know, he doesn't necessarily have the like charisma that some other people do.
I just was thinking of a Gavin Newsom, Jake Auchincloss ticket, and they kind of look alike.
Yeah,
And so
it's kind of
it's like
father-son a little
to have
bit.
the two of them
Yeah.
on a ticket would be like so
Yeah.
funny, and just feel like you're
I'm
in
white, and
like,
I'm
you're in like a
whiter.
like a Stanford
yeah.
fraternity.
yeah, totally. This is my this is my big brother. He's running for president.
But I think that is just kind of part of what we're seeing in the Democratic Party right now. It's like you had Spanberger win and then you had Mondani win, right? And sort of like I think that where I maybe disagree with some thought leaders is that I don't know that one of those has to be like the victor. You know, I think that a personality will emerge probably in the next couple years in terms of like, you know, presidential material. But I feel like in terms of policies, what those elections taught me, if anything, on the Democratic side, is that the country's like super fucking diverse and that it isn't a one size fits all. And I don't know what that means in terms of like the quote consolidation of power on the left. But what I do know that means is that we have a lot of people like Jake around the country who know what the people who they represent need. And I think that the Democrats are doing a much better job of that, of actually like governing for their constituents than Republicans are. They're just sort of missing that like central figure. But personally, I don't know that I've said this before. I don't think that's a problem right now. Like, I don't think that battle between like progressivism and modernism is like something that is going to tear the Democratic Party apart. Because I actually think we're starting to see respect between someone like Mamdani and someone like Jake Auchincloss, right? There's sort of a, we can all live here together. And then who's the person that can be that uniting factor is the big TBD, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's move on to what is very significant with respect to today's calendar date. At the time of record, it is Tuesday, January the 6th, 2026. We are 5 years officially from the January 6th insurrection. And today, the White House launched a website that is completely rewriting the history of January the 6th with some pretty insane, misleading, and outright lies, blaming Capitol Police for inciting the violence. Anthony, I feel like a lot of Republicans and moderates who I talk to who are not Trumpers or maybe were for Trump, but then fell off or soured, and this is a factor, still don't really know how to talk about January 6th. So from your perspective, we're 5 years later of this historic event. How do you think about this?
Yeah, no, I'm actually glad I have this section because I personally think it's really hard to talk about
Mm.
as well. I mean, you use the word insurrection, and I think whenever I've used that word, I get a lot of come on, it's
Yep.
not that.
Yep.
And you know, I to me, whenever that word has been used, it's like courts, Congress, and many historians have described it as an insurrection because it involved force intended to disrupt like a constitutional process, right?
Yep. Wow. Well
So,
said.
but and like just putting those facts on the table, you know, quick background here, right? On January 6th, this is 5 years ago, 2021, you know, there was a
Wild.
large crowd gathered in DC supporting then President Donald Trump, opposing the certification of the 2020 presidential election, while at the same time in Congress, they were meeting to certify the Electoral College votes. So a portion of the crowd ended up breaching, you know, police barricades, forcibly entered the Capitol building, and disrupted the joint session of Congress. Lawmakers were evacuated, some were even sheltered in place. The building was secured several hours later, but and then Congress reconvened that night to complete that certification. But let's just go through some crazy numbers to me. In DC that day, there were 30 to 50,000 people for these rallies. They said about 10,000 came onto the Capitol grounds. 2 to 2,500 actually entered the Capitol building. You know, not everyone who was present participated in violence or, you know, illegal entry. But that day also, there were only about 1,200 Capitol Police on duty, right?
Wow.
So just from those numbers, like officers were like totally outnumbered, overwhelmed by a minimum 2 to 1. National Guard was deployed, came hours later. There were at least 5 people who died that day. One was a rioter who was fatally shot by a Capitol Police officer who was trying to breach a secure area. 4 others were medical emergencies. They had heart attacks, strokes. And then there were several other deaths of Capitol officers later who died by suicide. There were 140 police officers who were injured, broken bones, head injuries, chemical burns. There were, you know, tons of rioters who were injured. There were 80 plus windows that were broken, you know, damaged doors, offices, artwork, equipment, right? Like, and then what followed was there were 1,200 people who were charged with misdemeanors from, you know, all types of assault to officers, you know, conspiracy, obstruction of official proceeding. But like, why is January 6th, I think, so significant? This was the first time since 1814 that the U.S. Capitol was forcibly breached. Right?
Well, those convictions, I should just mention, a lot of them were felony convictions as well.
Yeah.
Where these people were sentenced to many, many years in prison
for assaulting police officer and things like that.
Right.
Yeah. And to me, once again, when people are like, well, the Capitol is our house, it's our house.
No.
Yeah, there's still rules. Like,
right.
If also it's your house,
broke
like,
into your house,
yeah.
an alarm, you would say I was forcibly entering as well.
Yeah. I also just think I just think that whole thing of like, it's our house is obviously just bullshit. It's like, it's not, it's a government building. There are people doing their jobs in there who are incredibly important figures who many of whom face threats over and over again. And I think that what I think about when I think about January 6th happening 5 years ago is that similarly to COVID, it's like this huge thing that happened in the trajectory of our country that because of the chaos that we all live in on a daily basis and the incredible pace of the news cycle, and both under Biden and now under Trump's second administration, just like the wild shit that happens every day, we've had to kind of just like move on from. And I think about that a lot when it comes to COVID, because I don't think that we ever contextualize enough the despair that so many people are in and so many of our institutions are in. Were so affected by the COVID pandemic. And I also think that the state of our institutions, the state of our economy was incredibly impacted by what happened on January 6th. Like, I I think that it is a moment that cemented division in our country. I think that many people felt maybe when Biden got elected, like, okay, Biden's this kind of legacy politician. He has a lot of support amongst moderate Republicans. He's someone who has a demeanor of maybe knowing how to bridge the gap. And obviously that proved not the case at all. And I feel like January 6th was the beginning of that, was this showing of like, there's no hope for unity. There is no hope for understanding between the two sides. And the only outcome will ever be violence. And I just think that we haven't fully processed like how that has impacted us as Americans and as a society, because now for 5 years, we've been living in a world, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, where in many cases, the only answer feels like violence, either literally or metaphorically. And that is what I think makes America so weak right now as a country and makes us as Americans put in such a struggle, is that there's no answer to our problem that feels like it can be solved in the way we want to solve it. The only way to solve it is force.
I want to get to eventually at the end of this episode the win of the week because it relates to this. But I think, Anna, you were, to steal a phrase from Anthony, nailing the head of the nail.
Yo,
Hit the-
I think is
what
what
did
you
you
said
say
earlier.
I hit the
Something
nail
to
on the
that
head.
effect,
Did
yeah.
I hit the nail
Something
on the
about nailing the head of the nail on the head.
You really
Um,
nailed that one.
yeah.
You had it,
Like
head of the
hard.
nail.
Super
But
hard.
I think, like, when I think about, I think you're absolutely right, Anna, that the feeling and perception of weakness stems as well from all of the people who immediately were in that chamber trying to do the right thing, which was certify a free and fair election. And in the 3 weeks after January the 6th, all condemned the president, all condemned the rioters and insurrectionists, all praised the Capitol Police and the heroics of law enforcement, and absolutely unequivocally said this should never happen in our country. And then one by one, they all did this role reversal for their own selfish careers or positions to maintain in Congress or Senate or hold these positions of power. And they all know better. And we all watching them. We all watching people like Lindsey Graham, people like Mitch McConnell, people who are creatures of the Congress, who all denounce these actions, rightfully so, then come out and try and say, oh, this wasn't that bad, or oh, this was Antifa, or oh, this was the Democrats. It is just, it's insulting, it's beneath us, and it is literally the most un-American thing I can think of. And for anybody who thinks that that day was peaceful or that day wasn't an insurrection, I would point them to a cameraman from the LA Times who was there, Kent Nishimura. And he had about 30 minutes of footage that the LA Times, posted on their website and became actually a really critical piece of evidence documenting the day that prosecutors used to identify people. And it is a stunning 30 minutes of raw, unedited footage of him in the crowd as they head in, bursting through the doors of the Capitol. And it is so alarming and terrifying and just really insane footage to see. And to your point, Anna, it has come to this place of violence ruling the day. And I really worry that, to kind of tie it back to what we were talking about with Jake Auchincloss, that if we aren't ready to embrace somebody who is in the middle, whether that is a Republican or whether that is a Democrat, but somebody who is just more in the middle rather than on the far edges, I worry that the violence is only going to continue, because those extremes, ideologically speaking, are what push us apart. And it's the sort of common ground that I think is the thing that lowers the temperature.
I would argue, just to like amend that a little bit from my perspective is I don't know that it's about we need to find someone who is in the middle. I think it's more about we need to have someone who helps us understand that we agree on more than we disagree on. Because I think that like there's a difference between sort of someone who's like I sort of believe these like centrist moderate policies and sort of way of being versus somebody who I think can be a voice, like a pacifying voice. And look, it's hard. We're America. Part of our identity is military and is power. And I think that, you know, contrary to what many people on the more far left might think, I think that is an important part of American identity. I mean, it's why we have so much respect for our veterans because they have been emblematic of that power, right? Or for police officers, because good ones, because they are emblematic of that power. And so I completely agree with you. I just wonder if like and maybe this is me being naive, but it's kind of like what is missing for me is, like I said before, I think that there are so many people who maybe stormed the Capitol who actually might agree with policies that like Maxwell Frost puts forward, but there's
Right.
no one who can get through to both of those people and say that you are the same or you are more the same than you are different. Yeah, you might not agree on abortion or you might not agree, you know, it's like so I feel
Mhm.
like what is so frustrating about these videos like you're talking about from the LA Times reporter or like the many other accounts specifically from police officers about January 6th that are coming out today is just like the lack of respect for these things that we purport to define ourselves as Americans. And that I think is where we've lost the narrative. You know, I think
Yeah.
that who to me again whether it's Republican or Democrat like you said, if there is somebody that can come in and remind us like what it actually means to be a patriot or be a responsible citizen, like that is the person that I want leading the charge, even if I might disagree with them on certain policy, because I'm scared that like the reaction for so many of us, even if it's not physical violence, is anger and disagreement
Right.
and pushing someone
see,
aside.
I'm not convinced that people on the right are willing to listen to somebody who's very progressive, or
Yeah.
conversely, people who are very conservative, or sorry, people who are on the left aren't ready to listen to somebody who's very conservative. And even if they're speaking in the things that you're talking about, I feel like it's fundamentally contradictory to be a progressive but
Right.
speak to the middle, right?
Well, you know what it makes
Do
me
you
think
worry
about is
that's
like,
not possible?
I think that you're right. I mean, I think that I am being a little bit Pollyanna about it, but like what it just makes me think about is like it's so stupid that we only have two parties. Like there are just so many more belief systems in our country than these two parties, right? Like the way that what I'm thinking about is I'm like, oh yeah, there is like the poor person from rural America who wants Medicare for all, but you're 100% right. Zora Mamdani isn't their guy, right? So
Mhm.
it's like, what is that person's party? I don't think that person's a Republican. You know,
Yeah.
like I just don't, even though they've kind of been culturally kind of caught up in that basket. I don't think that Michael Bloomberg is a Democrat. You know, like it's like there's all these
Yeah,
different
that's it.
layers and I think that the like takeaway for me from January 6th is that we were shown that violence is okay and that violence is excusable and that violence is an appropriate response to disagreement. And that feeling and that acceptance has not disappeared for anybody over the last 5 years.
So I want to tell you that is so well said, and I
You
want
hit the head nail.
I nailed the nail on the.
You're
That's
you're
why-
on tonight. You're on
That's
tonight.
why we call Anna the head nail around here. So I think that like everything you're saying, Anna, is such a perfect segue into kind of maybe a nice way to end this, which is the win of the week. Which, if I was nominating a CNN hero, I would nominate this woman, Pamela Hemphill.
I thought you were going to say
Do you know
Pam
who that
Bondi.
is? No, Pamela
No.
Hemphill.
No, who is she?
So I think it's Hemphill. It could possibly be pronounced Hemphill, but I think it's Hemphill. She is the 70-plus year woman who rejected Trump's pardon for her role in the January 6th riots. She was sentenced to 60 days in federal prison. She served. And she testified today on Capitol Hill in a very emotional hearing, apologizing to the Capitol Police officer, and was very emotional and shaken. And she said, I own this. I reject a pardon. Accepting a pardon would be saying I did nothing wrong. I was wrong, and I'm committing myself to making it better. And I thought that this is so exemplary of everything you're saying, Anna. I can't think of anything more American than this woman who believed this thing. She did this thing. She was prosecuted lawfully. She served her time and now is rebuilding and given a second chance. And I think that that's America, right? We do these things. We make mistakes. We offer our people second chances who are representing the better versions of ourselves. And I think that she is somebody who should be celebrated. I think that every news outlet should cover her. And I think that she is exactly what we want people who were involved in this day to take away from the day, rather than what we're seeing the U.S. president and others of his cadre of hooligans trying to completely rewrite the history. And I so commend this woman, and I hope that people go watch the video of her. It's so incredible, and I'm just blown away, frankly.
I think it also speaks to, in the nature of like, how do we move past a world where that kind of anger and violence is the only option we see, is that we have to believe that people can change. Or we have to believe that most people at their heart are good. Like, I think that it is a disservice to all, because people would have written that woman off. Oh, you were a Jan 6 rioter, you went to jail, screw you, you know?
Right.
And she has shown that I have critical thinking skills. I can reflect and change. I'm in my 70s. People are always like, oh, they, a different generation, whatever. No, she's in her 70s. Like, and so I think I think this is actually even more true for people on the left, to believe that most people are good and that people can change. Or if they're not going to change, that they can be understanding, right? And I just think that is such an important takeaway for all of us, because if you just believe that somebody is bad because of who they voted for or because of an action that they did, then I don't know what to tell you. If they prove to you over and over again that they are bad and that
Trump will change. Trump will change.
I mean, maybe he might be a little far gone for my taste, but like, but I think that let this woman be an example for people to show that even on small scale stuff that isn't January 6th, like, you have to give people a chance, even if they don't end up agreeing with you in the end.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I don't agree with
Well,
you
Happy
two,
New
but
Year.
cheers.
Screw you.
I do agree with you. Actually, I agree with you guys totally.
Yeah, totally.
Hit the nail on the nail.
By the nail.
Anthony's
With the head.
slurring his words again.
It's that goblet of booze.
Yeah. Booze hounds.
Ugh.
That's in the